It's 2023, and everyone and their dog is using AI. Duolingo and Khan Academy integrated AI assistants into their apps. But it's no longer only the big companies that have the power to use AI. If you're a solo developer in 2023 and beyond, you now have the power to build AI software startups. And that's exactly what we'll do today by building an article summarizer application using OpenAI's GPT model. With a modern user interface, connection to OpenAI's GPT model, the integration of Redux Toolkit query, functionalities like copy to clipboard, browser history storage, and many more, Summarizer is the best AI-based web application that you can currently find on YouTube. So, how does it work? Well, you take the URL of a lengthy article, paste it here, and the AI will quickly provide a summary. It's as simple as that. Building this single web application with me will give you the knowledge needed to use all OpenAI APIs to build any application you can imagine. You'll even deploy to the internet so you can share it with your friends, potential employers, and put it on your portfolio. And later on, you can even start making money by offering it as a software-based service. You might be wondering, what are the prerequisites for building such a fantastic website? This course is entirely beginner-friendly. We'll use the most in-demand technologies such as React.js, Vite, Tailwind CSS, Redux Toolkit, and of course, one of the versions of OpenAI's API, but this time we'll be using it through Rapid API. We're going to start simple and then move to more complex concepts. I'll explain every step of the way. Alongside building this application, you'll also learn how to set up a React.js project using Vite, create a responsive, beautiful UI UX with a nice touch of glass morphism using Tailwind CSS, make advanced Redux Toolkit query API requests that fire on condition, save history using the local storage, handle form events and catch errors, implement copy to clipboard functionality, and of course, write clean code. Now, before creating a folder for our project code, we must first visit Rapid API. The link is going to be down in the description. The making of this entire app is possible only because of Rapid API. We're using their AI Summarizer API that quickly extracts and summarizes lengthy information from the article just by giving it a URL. AI does the rest of the work. To use this API, click the Rapid API link in the description, and then you can click Sign Up or Log In. In this case, I will log in since I already have the account, and once you're in, you'll be redirected to Rapid's API Hub, where you can find hundreds of thousands of APIs. This was the first step of our course. Now, let's create our great AI application, and then later on, we'll call this API straight from a React app. If this video reaches 20,000 likes, I'll record more AI applications. With that said, let's dive straight into the build. As we always do on JavaScript Mastery, let's start from bare beginnings by creating a new empty folder on our desktop. And let's call it something like AI Summarizer. Once you have it, just drag and drop it into an empty Visual Studio Code window. Once you're in, just open up a new terminal by going to Terminal and then New. Inside of here, we can initialize our new React application. To initialize our React application, we're going to use a tool called Vite. So just head to vitejs.dev, click Get Started, and scroll down. In here, you can find how to create a new application. It's just going to be as simple as running npm create vite at latest. So back in our terminal, you can run npm create vite at latest and press enter. For the project name, you can just type // to create it in the current repository. Choose React, JavaScript, and that's it. If you open up your File Explorer, you can see that now we have the source and all of the files needed to run our React application. Now, to start even more from scratch, we can open up the source and delete everything inside of it besides the main. So just select it, right-click it, and delete. We're going to start from bare beginnings. Also, in the public, you can delete the Vite SVG. Great. Before we get started with re-adding the important files and folders, let's first install all of the necessary dependencies we'll be using throughout our project. We can do that by running the command npm install add redux.js/toolkit. Yep, you heard that right. We'll be using Redux Toolkit for this project. And there is absolutely no Redux knowledge required for you to be able to follow along and build this application with me. You're going to learn it from scratch in this single video. And that's it. This is going to be the only dependency we're going to install. Everything else is going to be done by ourselves by hand. Great. Now that we have our dependency, we can go to Files and start creating our basic structure. Of course, we're going to need some icons and images for our application. And just to make the process easier for you, I've already prepared everything you need. So down in the description, you'll be able to find a zipped assets folder. Simply download it, unzip it, and then drag and drop it to the inside of the source folder. It should look something like this. There you can see that we have some icons, SVGs, but that's about it. You'll also notice that there we have this icon, which you can then drag and drop into the public folder. Great. With that said, we can create a new app.jsx. This is where our main application will go. Inside of there, you can run rafce. This is a special command that's going to create a basic React arrow function component. If this didn't work for you, go to Extensions and search for ES7 Plus, React Native Redux Snippets. You can install this and then it's gonna work. Great. Now that we have the app, we're gonna also need the app.css. So simply create a new app.css file inside of the source, and then from the GitHub gist down below, copy the styles we'll be using throughout this application. You can notice it's about 100 lines of styles, but it's mostly positioning some elements and then gradients, as you can see, that take more than half of this file. So no worry, besides this, everything else is going to be done by hand. Wonderful. And before we begin, you might have noticed in the CSS that we are importing Tailwind. Tailwind is a great utility-first CSS framework packed with classes like Flex, Padding Top 4, Text Center, and more. Essentially, you can create beautiful layouts, completely custom, just by adding classes to your JSX. So, to get started with installing Tailwind CSS, click Get Started, and let's search for Vite. Click Install Tailwind CSS with Vite, copy the installation command, open up the terminal, and then paste it, or type it out with me. That's going to be npm install -d Tailwind CSS, post CSS, and auto prefixer, and press enter. We can close these files. After that, we need to initialize it, so copy the second command. That's going to be npx Tailwind CSS init-p. Finally, we need to configure our template paths, so simply copy this tailwind.config.js and paste it in your own tailwind.config.js file. Inside of here, later on, we'll also be using our own custom fonts, so why not add it immediately? You can modify a Tailwind config by specifying things like a font family, where you can enter your own fonts. Like in here, GitHub Copilot gives me an example of using Sans, but we want to do something more custom. So let's use a Satoshi font that's going to be equal to an array of Satoshi and sans serif. And then also let's do inter font. That's going to be an array of inter and then sans serif. This is going to allow us to utilize these fonts from within our application. But of course, to be able to use these fonts, we have to import them. And we're going to do that in the index.html. In that same GitHub gist down below, you can find the modified index.html containing these two new links. One is going to be for the Satoshi family, and then one is going to be from Google Fonts for the inter font. Great. Now our index.html is going to provide those fonts, and our Tailwind is going to listen to it and take them in. Not to forget, we are already utilizing the Tailwind configuration from within our app.css. So with that, our setup should be done. What we can do next is open up the terminal, clear it, and run the application by running npm run dev. Vite is immediately going to spin up our application on localhost. And there we go. We open it up, but with an error. It says that we have an error in the main.jsx. That's okay. We just forgot to remove the import of this index.css file, which we no longer have. And if we do that, save it, and go back, we can see a little app right here on top left, which means that we are ready to start developing it. Also, if you want to change the title there on the top, simply go to index.html and change it right here. I'm going to call it OpenAI Article Summarizer. And if you want to get this great favicon to show, we just need to rename this link from vite.svg to favicon.ico. If we save this, go back and reload, you can see we have our great favicon as well as the title appear on top, which means that we are completely ready to start with the development. Now I'm going to put our browser side by side by the editor so that we can see the changes that we make live. There we go. This is looking good to me. So we can, of course, start from our app.jsx. This is going to be the main part of our application, inside of which we're going to import and use all of the other components. So what we can do is we can immediately create a structure for two additional components we're going to need in our application. New folder called components, and it's going to have two components. One is going to be called demo.jsx, where we're going to actually show the summary part of the article, and there we can run RAFCE. And the other component is going to be called hero.jsx, meaning a hero section of the website, a big title telling everybody what the app does. Of course, you can run RAFCE there as well, and we can get back to the app. Now, inside of the app, we can, of course, import the hero coming from /components/hero. We can duplicate that, and we can also import the demo component. And in newer versions of React, we no longer have to import React from React, so this is looking good. Now, if I'm not mistaken, we have all the styles we need in the app.css, but we're nowhere importing it. So app.jsx is the best place to import that style sheet. So let's say import /app.css. And you can immediately see that the font changed. Wonderful. Now let's create the structure of our application by renaming this div to an HTML5 semantic main tag, inside of which we're going to have a div that's going to have a class name equal to main, and it's going to have a div that's going to be a self-closing div with a class name equal to gradient. If we save this, we're going to immediately get this phenomenal looking background and a gradient. So we have a nice slate to work with. Finally, below this div, we can create another div, which is going to be of a class name equal to app, meaning everything else in our app is going to go here, primarily the hero section, a self-closing component, and then finally a demo section where the magic will happen. And that's it. Believe it or not, we're done with our app.jsx component. When working in React, you always want to keep your components small and separate. That means that now we can close all of the currently open files and just jump into the hero section, which is going to be our next task. Just to pump you up for what you're about to develop, I open up the deployed version of the application, and in here you can see that we're going to have this navigation bar with a link to our project, and then we're going to focus on this part right now. A big title and then a description telling us what this application can do. So, without any further ado, let's get started. Inside of our hero.jsx, we can import logo coming from /assets, and we're going to return something known as a header. That header is going to have a class name equal to w-full, meaning it's going to take 100% of the width. Flex, justify-center, items-center, and flex-call, meaning the items are going to appear in a column and not a row. Now, if any of these properties are new to you, that must be that you're new to Tailwind. And don't be afraid. As I told you at the start, Tailwind is a great technology to learn. It allows you to style completely custom applications incredibly quickly and easily. Now, it is true that it has a bit of a learning curve, but it is not as steep as you might think. If you're wondering what any of these class names mean, simply go to search and then type it in here. For example, w-full. It's going to tell you right here that that's going to take 100% of the width. Or maybe you're wondering about padding. How do I do padding? We'll just go here and immediately it's going to tell you that you can do P, PX, PY, and so on. So what I'm trying to say is read the documentation. Whenever you're stuck with something or whenever you're unsure with something in this video, don't simply go with the flow and type it out. Go to Tailwind CSS, search it, and be 100% clear of what you're doing. Now, one thing that may also help is if you go to extensions and search for Tailwind. There, you'll find Tailwind CSS IntelliSense. And what this extension does is, if you hover over the Tailwind property, it's going to show you the corresponding CSS style for it. It's incredibly useful if you're just starting to learn Tailwind. My goal is for you to fully learn web development. And I don't mean just by following these videos. I want you to be an independent and confident developer. So I just want to take a moment of your time and point our attention to JS Mastery Pro, the Masterclass. We have created a 6-month-long bootcamp where we teach you how to become a software engineer with a complete money-back guarantee, which means you are destined to succeed. So if you want senior developers, myself included, to mentor you on your growth, if you're feeling confused while learning on your own, or if you just need some assistance in a path to get you to where you need to be, JSM Masterclass is the way to go. So just go to jsmastery.pro and I'll see you there. With that said, we can proceed with today's great build by putting something inside of this great header. That something is going to be a nav. That nav is going to have a class name equal to flex. It's going to be justified between, which means that the content is going to show on the left and on the right side. We want to center the items, so items.center. That's going to be that means vertically centered, and flex-call, meaning they're going to appear in a column. Inside of there, we're going to have an image. That's going to be a self-closing tag that's going to have a source equal to logo. That logo needs to have an alt tag, of course, as all images need to, and that's going to be sums logo. Class name is going to be equal to w-28, meaning if you hover over it, width of 7 rem. And it's also going to contain object-contain. There we go. This is looking good. Now, just below that image, we are creating this as an open source project. So we want to add a button that's going to point to our GitHub repository. So we can say something like GitHub. We can give it a type equal to button. And let's give it an on click, something like a callback function, where we're going to call the window dot open. And then in here, you can provide the link to your project. So something like https://github.com, and then your profile, and finally the link to your project. For now, I'm going to leave it like this. And also, let's give it a class name equal to black_btn. If we now save this, you can see it appear right here. Now, this is not looking exactly as it should, right? So what was I thinking adding the flex call right here on the navigation bar? We want it to appear in a row. So this was a mistake from my end. Instead of that, we want to give it a w-full, meaning full width. And we also want to give it a margin bottom of 10 to divide it a bit from the content below, and also a PT or padding top of 3. And this is going to give us a great looking navigation bar that is, of course, fully responsive. With that said, we can scroll down of this button and also down below the navbar. There, we can add a new H1 element, our heading, that's going to have a class name equal to head_text. We want to say something like summarize articles with. Let's give it a break tag. And then below, we want to add a span that's going to say OpenAI GPT-4. Now, if we save this, you can see everything in this wonderful font family, but it's a bit too dark. So what do you say that we give a gradient to this span? Something like class name equal to orange_gradient. This is looking much better. This was a gradient that we have prepared for you. So if you're interested to see how it was done, go to the app.css, search for orange, and you can find it right here. Essentially, it says BG gradient to right from amber 500 via orange to yellow, text transparent, and that is it. Great. Now, we only want to break this on smaller devices, not on larger ones. So we can say on this break tag, class name is equal to maxMD is hidden. So we only want to do it on one type of the devices. There we go. This is looking good. And then as we break it, it looks like this. This is looking great to me. We now have our great title, but what is a title without a subtitle? So let's go to create an H2 element that's going to have a class name equal to desk or description, DESC for short. And inside of here, we can say something like simplify your reading with Summarize, an open source article summarizer that transforms lengthy articles into clear and concise summaries. Of course, feel free to type whatever you prefer into here. You can pause this video and give it a go. I'm happy with what we have here. And as you can see, we are now fully done with our hero section. We know what our application is about, so we can close it and we can go back to the app.jsx. Rather, we want to go into the demo part right here. This is where the rest of the magic will happen. As from here, we're going to actually create that input. We're going to make a button that's going to make requests to our great API summarizer coming from Rapid API. Great job coming this far. Let's take a breath and then let's continue to a more interesting part of this video. And that is, first of all, doing the JSX for this, but then doing the API fetching functionality. So to get started, let's first import two hooks coming from React. The first one is going to be the most famous hook there is, the useState hook, and then its contender, the useEffect hook. Alongside those, we're going to also import some icons, such as the copy to clipboard button, the link icon, loader, and then the tick. And these are coming from /assets. That's all that we need for now. With that said, let's start creating the JSX. We need to create this wonderful looking input to start with. So let's turn this div into a semantic section tag, and let's give it a class name of MT16, meaning margin top for rem to divide it a bit from the top. W-full of full width. Max-W-XL, meaning maximum width of extra large. Inside of there, we want to now create a search. So that's going to be our first component. We can first wrap it in a div that's going to serve as a container. It's going to have a class name equal to flex, flex-column, or col for short, W-full, and then gap-2 to divide it a bit from surrounding elements. Immediately within that container div, we can create a form element. That form is going to have a class name equal to relative, flex, justify center, and items-center. And of course, every form needs to have an on submit, which is for now going to be just an empty callback function to which we're going to add the logic later on. And now inside of this form, we can start creating our input. Let's start by creating an image, a self-closing image tag that's going to have a source equal to link icon. It's going to have an alt tag equal to link_icon and a class name of absolute, left-0, my-2, meaning margin y on top and bottom, ml of 3, margin left of 5, and then w of 5 for the width. If we save this, you can see this great looking link icon, which is going to be a part of our URL. So let's create that famous looking input through which all of the logic of our application is going to be connected. If you didn't know, there is a type of an input called URL. So we can place that right here, and we can add a placeholder, something like enter a URL. Of course, every link has to have a value, and for now we can put it as an empty string. Also, if we have a value, we have to have a way for us to change that value, so we can add an empty handle change just for now, or rather an on change. We're going to make this input required as it's the only part of our form, and we're going to give it a class name equal to URL underscore input, and then also space peer. This means that when you need to style an element based on the state of a sibling element, you can mark that sibling element with a peer class, and then we can use modifiers. You're going to see later on what do I mean. Essentially, we want to change the button depending on the state of our input. Now, if we save that, you can see that we have a wonderful looking input right here. Let's add that button, which is going to be a sibling element. Button is going to be of a type is equal to submit, since we are inside of a form. It's going to have a class name equal to submit underscore btn. And inside of here, we can just say something like submit, or I found this great icon online, which is essentially an enter sign. And there we go. This is looking great. So just feel free to Google to submit icon, submit emoji, or whatever you want to put in here. Great. Now, let me show you what I meant when I added this peer class name right here. Based on this, we can now say peer dash focus border dash gray dash 700 and peer dash focus text dash gray dash 700. This means that if we focus this element, the button is going to get focused as well. And you can see how simple that is to do it with Tailwind. Great. That is it for our input. Below the input, of course, below our form, meaning right here, we want to show the history. So we want to show the history, browse, URL, history. We want to see which URLs have we seen. So that's going to be the next part. And then after that, below this div below, we want to, of course, display results. I'm just adding comments so it's easier to see where we are. Now, of course, we cannot display a browse URL history or display results if we don't have the logic. So what do you say that now we focus on adding logic and functionality to our application by, of course, making the API request to our article summarizer API coming from Rapid API. And we can do that by adding a new use state field at the top. So let's use a use state snippet. Let's call the state article, set article, and that's going to be an object that's going to have a property of URL equal to an empty string at the start and summary equal to an empty string at the start as well. Now that we have that, we have to create a const handle submit function. This is an arrow function from within which we're going to make the API request. So this has to be an asynchronous function, and we're getting a click event right here inside of it. For now, let's simply alert that we clicked it. So let's alert something like submitted. And we can call it right here within our form on submit by simply passing the handle submit right here. So now if you press the button, it's going to ask you to fill out the field, but you cannot fill it because we cannot yet modify the input. So let's scroll down to the input. Let's add the value equal to article.url. And then of course we have to change it by getting the event, that is the key press event. And then we have to call the set article is equal to an object where we spread the current article value, meaning ... article, and then we set the URL to be equal to e.target.value. Now we can type test and we can press enter. But of course, it has to be a URL. So let's do test.com. Still nothing. It has to have an https :/ at the start. And now if you press enter, you can see submitted. Great. Now, once we submit it, right here, we don't simply want to alert a string. We want to make an actual API request to an AI GPT-based summarizer. And how do we do that? Well, to be able to do that, we're going to exit this file and we need to focus on implementing Redux. You might think it is complicated, but with the introduction of Redux Toolkit, Redux became so much simpler. So let's get started. You can think of this as a crash course in Redux Toolkit, how to make API requests from within your application in a structured and a scalable way. First, we can go to source and then main.jsx. Inside of here, we can import something known as a provider coming from React-Redux. And now that I think about it, I don't think we imported this package. So if we go right here, we can see Redux.js Toolkit, and that's true, but we haven't installed React Redux. So let's stop the application from running by pressing Ctrl+C and run npm install React-Redux. As soon as the package gets installed, you can simply rerun the application by running npm run dev, hide the terminal, go back to main, and the application is going to no longer complain. Now, what do you do with this provider? Well, you simply wrap your entire application with it, just like this. We have our app, which means absolutely everything we have, and then we wrap it with something known as a provider. And that provider is going to service our app with something known as a store. So let's create a store, meaning a global state. Inside of the source, we can create a new folder called services. Inside of the services, we can create a new file called store.js. Inside of there, we can import something known as configure store coming from @redux.js/toolkit. They made it so easy so that we can simply import something known as configure store. Then we can export const store is equal to configure store, which we call as a function, and pass in an object. Inside of there, we have to have a reducer. You can think of a global store or the state is the whole cake. The reducer is going to allow us to get a specific slice of that cake. So we can reduce the entire state to only grab what we need. Okay? Then we also have something known as a middleware. This allows us to do something with the state before we get it. In this case, we just have to do the default setup. You can find this in the documentation, but just to simplify it, you have to create a callback function, inside of which you're going to say get default middleware. You create an arrow function. You call that get default middleware. Then you call the .concat on it, and then we'll have to pass something inside of here. And that something is going to make the reducer work. So let's create something known as a service. In this case, it's going to be article.js, meaning this is one specific part of our state of our global store. Inside of here, we can import something known as create API and fetch base query. And that is coming from at redux.js/toolkit/query/react. Ensure this path is the same as it is here. And then you can export const article API is equal to create API. You call it as a function and you provide the options object. It must have something known as a reducer path, which is just a string, article API. And later on, we're going to also give it a base query and the endpoints, which we can call. But that is all that we need for now to set up the store. So let's now go back. Inside of the store, let's import the article API coming from /article. We have to use it as a reducer. Inside of square brackets, article API .reducer path is equal to article API .reducer. I'm going to expand this a bit further so you can fully understand what is happening here, and I'm going to even zoom it out a bit. So one more time, we're configuring a store. A store is a global state that saves the entire information of our application. But in most cases, you don't need the entire state. You only need to reduce it to a specific slice of the pie. And in this case, it's going to be the article API, meaning we want to just get something from this API. To be able to make this work, we add it as a reducer, and we add it right here in the middleware by saying article API dot middleware. If you ask me, hey, why do I have to do all of this? Unfortunately, I don't have the correct answer for you. This is just taken from the official Redux Toolkit documentation. If you want to, we can explore it together. I simply Googled Redux Toolkit store, and it pointed me to configure store. Inside of here, we can see the parameters that the create store accepts, but hopefully we can get a demo. There we go, a basic example. Configure store, to which you need to pass a reducer. And then in here, we have a more complicated example. And there we go. We have a middleware, we get default middleware, and then we can pass something to it. Great. Now, if we go back, we have everything we need to export our store. So we can go back to the main and we can import that store. That's going to be import store inside of curly braces from /services/store. And now that we are wrapping our entire app with a provider, we simply need to say store is equal to store. I think if you hover over it, it even says the single Redux store in your application. Now, if we save this and bring it back and reload the application, we're going to still have an error. So let's go to console, and it says inject.endpoints is not a function. That means that we have successfully set up our store, but our article API still misses some stuff. It needs to have the endpoints, meaning what do we want to call? So let's add the endpoints right here. That's going to be a call to the callback function, where we're going to get something known as a builder here to help us build those endpoints. We create an immediate return, where you can now create your specific endpoint. In this case, we can call it get summary. That's going to be equal to builder.query, and then in here, we can specify which query do we want to get. So something like query is equal to a function where we get params, and then we return a URL. In this case, let's just do test. That's all that we need for now, just to ensure that we're back where we started and our application works. Great. Our application works. We have successfully set up the store, and now we can start working on our Create API. Before we set up our first route, let's first set up something known as a base query. Base query is going to be equal to fetch base query. That's a function to which we can pass some options. One of the options is a base URL, meaning which API do we want to call. And of course, for that, we'll have to head to Rapid API. More specifically, the exact API we'll be using to make the summarization happen. The link to this API is down in the description. You can click it, read more about the API, and then click subscribe to test. As you can notice, the basic plan is completely free, and it allows us for 100 requests a month, which is going to be more than enough to test it out and to even have the app deployed and ready for other people to play with it. Of course, if you want to end up using this app commercially, you can. In that case, these $15 are going to seem like nothing because you will be charging for the summarizations straight from the app itself. If that's something you would like me to do in an upcoming video, teach you how to turn this into a real SaaS-based startup for article summarization, just let me know in the comments down below and I will make it happen. For now, let's subscribe to the basic plan and go back to endpoints. As you can see, the API has 3 different requests. It has a post request, the summarize endpoint, as well as the extract endpoint. In this case, we'll be using the summarize endpoint. So how does it work? You have to pass the URL, the length, which is optional, meaning how many paragraphs do you want to get back, and just that's it. Test it. You can immediately test it out with the demo article right here. It's going to take some time since it has to do the summary, and then you can see what you're going to get back. It's just a single object with a summary and then a string right here. This is why I love Rapid API. Not only can you find great APIs, but you can also test them out right in the browser and see if they give you the data you need for developing your application. With that said, let's go to code snippets right here, and let's copy this entire options object. Once you copied it, you can move back here and paste it at the top. First, we need the URL. So copy this entire URL all the way to the / without the summarize. And then paste it right here as the base URL. It should look something like this. It should end with rapidapi.com /. What else will we need from here? Well, we're going to need some headers because they contain our special API keys that allow us to make requests. So below the base URL, you want to add a comma and then say prepare headers is equal to a function where you get headers as the first parameter. And then inside of that function, you want to say headers dot set, and now we can set the header. The first header is the X Rapid API key, which you can pass here. And then as the second parameter, you need to pass the actual key value. For now, we can leave that hard-coded as a key. We can duplicate that. We also have to pass the Rapid API host, which we can do here, and then paste the article, extractor, and summarizer string. There we go. Now, see this key right here. We want to use it, but you don't want to place it right here within your code, because then if you publish it on the internet, on GitHub, or anywhere else, people will be able to get to your key. What you instead want to do is create a new .env file right in the root of our folder, .env. That stands for environmental variables. And there, you need to start it with a keyword vt, as we're using vt, and then name it however you want to. I'm going to do vt underscore rapid underscore API underscore article underscore key. And then I'm going to paste the key that I had copied from my Rapid API platform. You can save that, go back to the article, and now you can delete this entire options object, and you can say const rapid API key is equal to import .meta.env .vt underscore rapid underscore API underscore article underscore key. There we go. And now you can simply paste it right here. Headers.set xRapid API key is equal to rapid API key, which we're getting from our environment variables. Now, to make this truly work, you have to open up your terminal, press Ctrl+C to stop it from running, and then npm run dev one more time to restart it. This is going to ensure that the changes in your environment variables get picked up. And finally, once we set the headers, we need to say return headers. Great. We have now created our API. We gave it a reducer path. We gave it a base query, a base URL, and we set the headers. What else do we need to do? Well, the only other thing we have to do is create the endpoint. So we're going to say get summary, where we get some parameters, and what is the endpoint we want to call? Well, if we go back here, you can see it is /summarize. So let's do /summarize, and then we want to pass some parameters. You can see that the URL is one of the required parameters. So let's say $URL is equal to, and we're going to pass that to this call through params. So we can say params.article URL. We can say, and we can hard code the length of the paragraphs by saying length is equal to 3. You can, of course, modify that to suit your purposes. It can be longer or it can be shorter. Great. Finally, Redux Toolkit query makes it so easy for us. It automatically creates a hook out of this endpoint. So we can say export const use get summary query is equal to article API. Now, this would be what we would have used if we wanted to call it immediately at the start, but we don't want to call it at the start because we are lazy. We want to call it once we enter a URL and then press the button. So we're going to get something from Redux Toolkit query called use lazy get summary query. This allows us to fire this hook on demand. We don't have to fire it as soon as the app loads, but on demand, once the user enters the URL and presses the submit button. Great. Finally, before we test it out, there was one thing that I noticed while creating this application, and that is that the article URL that we pass might sometimes contain some special characters which are going to cause problems or errors, or in general, unexpected behavior in our application. So whenever you're passing something in the URL, you want to wrap it in a function called encode URI component, like this. This is built into JavaScript, and it says encodes a text string as a valid component of a uniform resource identifier, or a URI. So whenever you pass any user-generated content into the URL, definitely wrap it with this function. With that said, we're now exporting this hook. And don't forget, we're wrapping our app with the provider that contains the store that contains the article API, which means that now we are ready to go all the way back to our components, demo, and then at the top, import the hook that we just created. That is as simple as import use lazy get summary query coming from /services /article. Of course, that is a hook, so we call it as any other hook by saying const. Now, since we're using the lazy query, the first parameter that we get is a function that's going to execute it. So we can call it getSummary. And then inside of an object, we get the error or is fetching. So we're going to know what's exactly happening with this URL. And that is equal to use lazy getSummary query, and we don't have to pass anything to it. That is it. So we now have the capability to know whether we have an error, whether we are fetching, and hey, we have a function to actually call once we click the button to get the summary of an article. Great. That is what we wanted all along inside of this handle submit. So the only thing we have to do now is say const data, to get data back out of it, is equal to await get summary. And we pass in an object where the article URL is equal to article.url. Finally, we have to check if we get something out of it. So we can say if data dot summary. In that case, we want to create a new article. Const new article is equal to an object where we spread the current article, and then we add a summary equal to data.summary, like so. And finally, we can set article to be equal to new article. There we go. And of course, in our case, why not also console log it to see what we're working with? What do you say? Let's test it out. I'm going to open up the console and I'm going to put it on the bottom so we can see everything clearly. And let's enter a URL. Oh, one cool thing. You don't necessarily have to enter article URLs. You can enter a website and then immediately have it summarized for you. So let's enter jsmastery.pro right here and press enter. Oh, the app gets reloaded. That's because whenever you're working with React, you have to add a little e.prevent default. This is going to prevent the default behavior of the browser, which is to reload the application. Once you add it, let's give it another shot. Okay, we clicked it, nothing seems to be happening, but if you go to the network tab and kind of look for that request, it should be there. Let's give it maybe 10 seconds to see if we get something. And while I was speaking, we immediately get it back. We get a URL, and then we have the summary right here, in this case, talking about jsmastery.pro. Wonderful. Now, as you can see, we're currently not doing anything with that URL. So that's going to be our next step. We have to save it into local storage and then display it right below. Let me give you an example of what should really happen. I'm going to go to the finished version of the application, paste the same URL, and press enter. We should get this wonderful looking loader. And keep in mind, this does take 5 to 10 seconds depending on the article because it's actually processing it. It's doing some AI work, and then we should get the summary looking like this. But we should also get this little thing, which is a history button. Meaning once we search for multiple articles, we want to show the last 5 and we want to store them to local storage. So before we actually show the summary here, let's make this part of the application work. To do that, on top of just storing one article, the current one, we also have to store all articles. So let's create a new useState field called const all articles, set all articles, and then make that equal to useState, at the start equal to an empty array. Now, what do we want to do? Once we set a single article, we also want to push it to the updated all articles array. So let's say const updated all articles is equal to an array containing a new article, and then we also spread all articles like this. And then we can say set all articles, and we updated with updated all articles. Hopefully this makes sense. Essentially, we're just pushing the new article to this array. Now, of course, we're not displaying that, but it's good to know that we have them. Or at least we do have the articles until we reload the page. So if you reload it, you lose everything. And that's not a pleasant experience, especially not in modern web development. What happens if you accidentally close a tab or lose the connection? We want to keep access to what we searched. So let's store it into local storage. It's going to be as simple as adding one use effect hook. This use effect accepts a callback function and something known as a dependency array. That dependency array is going to be empty, meaning we want to execute it at the start of our application, as soon as the page loads. Inside of there, we can say const articles from local storage is going to be equal to json.parse local storage dot get item, and then we pass in a string of articles. This is going to give the data back to us. Finally, we have to check if we have any articles from local storage. In that case, we want to set all articles to be equal to articles from local storage. It is as simple as that. Now, this is only going to add it to our state if there are any articles from the local storage, but in here, we're just using get item. We're never actually updating the local storage. So once we add an article, right at the end, we want to do local storage dot set item. We want to update dot articles with a json.stringify updated all articles. And you want to stringify it because local storage only can contain strings. Great. Now, the only way to test this out is to actually implement the JSX for our browse URL history. So that's going to be our next job. But to be able to see what we're developing, let's just one more time add another URL right here. This time, let's go to the masterclass and let's see what that is about. I'm going to paste it right here and press enter. Of course, we don't have the loading yet, so let's let it load. And while it is doing that, let's just create a new div. This div is going to have a class name equal to flex -call, meaning we want to show the elements one on top of the other, gap-1 to give it some space, max-h-60, meaning max height, overflow-y-auto, meaning we want to be able to scroll through the history. Inside of here, we can loop through all articles. By saying all articles dot map, we get each individual article, or we can call it an item, and the index of that item. For each one, we want to instantly return something, meaning you want to use a parenthesis here and not a curly brace. Now, what do we want to return? Well, it's going to be a div that's, of course, going to have a key equal to a template string of link dash index. We want to make it custom and unique. It's going to have an on click equal to, and this is simply going to call the set article, and we're going to pass in the item. So in case you want to get back to a summary of an article you previously visited, you can do that immediately without making another call. Isn't that great? And finally, we can give it a class name equal to link_card. If we save this, we can see a new rectangle appear. But let's populate it with some content. Let's give it a div equal to a class name of copy_btn. This is going to allow us to copy the URL in case we want to go back to it. Inside of there, we're going to have a self-closing img tag that's going to have a source equal to, for now, let's simply say copy. Alt tag is going to be copy icon, and class name is going to be equal to w-copy. instead of curly braces, 40%, H dash instead of curly braces, 40%, and object dash contain. If we save this, you can see this great copy to clipboard button. And right below that image and the div as well, we want to simply add a p tag that's going to contain the item.url. And there we go. Indeed, the link that we have here was added to the history. Let's style it a bit by giving it a class name equal to flex-1, font-satoshi, text-blue-700, font-medium, text-small, and truncate. In case it is too long, that's going to end it with dots. Great. This is looking good. Now, if we search for more, you should be able to see more of these pop up. But of course, why would we search for more if we didn't yet read the summary of the page that you searched for? So that means that we can jump into the display results, go just above the closing section, and then in here, we can implement the most important part, and that is displaying results. So let's wrap everything in a div, and let's give it a class name equal to my-10, meaning margin top and bottom, max-w-full, flex, justify-center, and items-center. Inside of here, we want to check if we are currently fetching. So we can say if is fetching. In that case, we want to instantly return an image that's going to have a source equal to loader, alt equal to loader, and class name is going to be w-20, h-20, and object-contain. Now, if we're not fetching, we want to check if we have an error. So if we have an error, we want to show a simple p tag that's going to say, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. Let's style it a bit by giving it a class name equal to font-inter, font-bold, text-black, and text-center. Just to provide a bit more meaningful information, let's give it a break tag and create a span inside of that p tag where we're going to do error !data !error. So inside of here, we can see the actual error. So if a developer is using the app, they're going to know what to do. To style it a bit, we can give it a class name equal to font-satoshi, font-normal, and text-gray-700. But hopefully, we won't even be able to see this error because it's going to work first try. Now, if we're not fetching, and if we don't have an error, we simply want to show the most important part, and that is check if we have the article.summary, and if we do, display a div. This div is going to have a class name equal to flex, flex-call, and gap-3. Inside of there, we want to give it an h2, which is going to say article, and then a span, summary. We want to style this summary a bit by giving it a class name equal to blue_gradient. And we can also style the h2 by giving it a class name equal to font-satoshi, font-bold, text-gray-600, and text-xl. If we save this, we cannot see anything yet, and that's because we misspelled summary here. So if I fix this, we can see article summary. Below the h2, we want to create another div. This div is going to have a class name equal to summary_box. And inside of there, we want to render a p tag that's going to render the article.summary. There we go. This means that we have successfully connected our application to the Rapid API, made a request using Redux Toolkit, and now we're properly displaying that data inside of our application, which means that the state is being transferred all the way from our services right here to our application through this get use lazy summary query. Great. Let's also style this text just a bit by giving it a class name equal to font-inter, font-medium, text-sm, and text-gray-700. This is looking more like it. And with that, we are done with our demo, and we are actually seeing our article summary. But now we wanted to test if our history is going to work, meaning if we now search for a different article, is this one still going to remain here and also in local storage? So for example, let's use this Rapid API website. Let's summarize the summarizer page. We can do that by pasting it right here and press enter. Now we can see this great looking loading. And again, it does take 5 to 10 seconds. Hopefully not too long. And there we go. We can see our summary. The article extractor in Summarizer API is a tool that can extract the body of a news article from a URL and summarize its content using GPT, which is exactly what we are doing with the power of that API, but we're doing it from within a wonderful UI UX developed application so that people can just come to it and get all of the benefits without knowing how to code. And essentially, that's what a SaaS business or a software as a service business is. You provide software to people. The last thing to make this a business is, of course, add payment options. So as I mentioned before, if you want me to turn this into a real business where you can add payments to it and expand it further, just let me know down in the comments. Now, the main question is, can we switch between the history? And we can. As you can see, the whole summary of the previously searched article is saved in the local storage, which means that you don't necessarily have to make another request. You're immediately getting the value out of it. That is great. And with that, the last part we have to do is copy the clipboard button. Right now, if you click it, it just opens the summary. But in case you want to revisit this URL, we're too lazy to kind of copy it and then go here and paste it. You just want to click here and copy it immediately. I'm going to teach you how to do that as well. So we can go all the way down below the handle submit, and we can add a const handle copy function that's going to accept a copy URL right here. Inside of the state, we also want to create a new one called use state, and that's going to be copied and set copied at the start equal to an empty string. Of course, this is supposed to be set copied. Now that we have that, inside of the handle copy, you can say set copied to be equal to copy URL, and then use the built-in navigator .clipboard.write text copy URL. This is what actually makes the copy button work. And then we want to reset the copied after a specific amount of time to be able to show the successful animation. So we can say set timeout, where we have a callback function, where we're going to reset the set copied to false after, let's say, 3 seconds. So now we can put this inside of this copy icon right here. Source is copy. We have this div, and on that div, we're going to add an onClick where we have a callback function where we call the handle copy and paste in the item.url. Now, depending on the state of the copied, we want to show a different icon. If we have currently copied, so if copied is equal to an item.url, in that case, we want to show a tick, meaning a successful copy. Else we show the copy icon. We can also change the alt. And now if we save this and click copy, you can see how we get this success icon. And you can actually paste it in the browser and search for the full version of that website if that's what you want to do. So we made the copy work as well. And with that said, believe it or not, we came to the end of the development of this great summarizer application. Now, you know that here in JavaScript Mastery, I always like to take you a step further. be that landing a developer job through our courses in the masterclass, or teaching you how to deploy this project to the internet so that you can showcase it in your portfolio and get a job. So that's going to be our next step. We can close all of the open files as well as tabs and just open up Netlify. When I have to deploy simple React applications without needing a fully custom domain or speed or anything else, I simply use Netlify. I'm going to teach you how to deploy your application right now using Netlify. Now, if I was deploying this app to be a paid software as a service business, I would have definitely used Hostinger. They are cheap, but credible and allow you to have a custom domain. So, in case you want to use them to have something a bit more professional, the link is going to be down in the description. To get started deploying our app on Netlify, you can click Get Started for free, log in with one of the services, scroll all the way down, and then in here you can drag and drop your site output folder. So, how do we get to that? Well, open up the terminal, stop it from running by pressing Ctrl+C, and then run npm run build. Vite is going to generate an optimized production build of your application, so we can simply drag and drop it into Netlify. And while I was speaking, it was already done. You can see this new dist folder appear right here. You can click Reveal in File Explorer or Open in Finder if you're on Mac. Finally, drag and drop the dist folder right into here. As you can see, it's going to open the site and your new URL is here. If you click it, you're going to notice that the site is already deployed. Isn't that great? Let's test it out with something like https://jsmastery.pro. You can see that it's loading, but it says, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. An error occurred. The reason why that happened is because we have to add our environment variable here as well. Remember, environment variables are local. So go to Site Settings, Environment Variables, and then add a variable. Import from a .env file. And you can simply paste the contents of that env file here and import variables. It is as simple as that. We can go back to Site Overview. We can now close this, reload the page, and retry it. And one more time, we get, well, that wasn't supposed to happen. But that's okay. This happens when there isn't a lot of content to put into a summary. So in this case, let's try to focus on real articles. I went to medium.com and let's try to go teaching ChatGPT to speak my son's invented language. Okay, that seems interesting. So let's go ahead and copy the URL and paste it right here. As you can see, it's loading, which is a good sign. So we can expand it to see it in its full glory. And in just a couple of seconds, we have a full result right here. Just to check if it's gonna work on a website again, let's try it with the masterclass URL. Paste it right here. And it looks like it's doing its thing. Let's take a moment to go through this a bit to see if it really can properly summarize a huge page that we just passed into it. The JSM Masterclass Experience is a 6-month program that aims to help aspiring developers land their dream job. The program is flexible and remote, allowing students to learn on their own schedule from the comfort of their homes. It includes hands-on experience, on-demand learning, and personalized support with a focus on building practical projects to gain experience, exactly as you did by building this while watching me. But in the masterclass, you will do it on your own with the help of the mentors. It requires about 20 hours per week and includes monthly team projects, algorithm exercises, mock interviews, front-end challenges, and more. Students receive one-on-one mentoring sessions, feedback on their code, and access to webinars, Q&As with me, and more. I would say this is a pretty good summary of what we do. With that said, I wanted to congratulate you for coming to the end of this phenomenal video and for building it out with me and deploying it to the internet. Once again, huge thanks to Rapid API, not only for sponsoring this video, but for creating such a phenomenal hub of thousands of APIs that we can use to develop our applications. And once again, if you want me to upgrade this project and turn it into a real SaaS business by allowing users to purchase a specific amount of summaries, let me know in the comments below and we'll make it happen. With that said, that's gonna be it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day.